This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.
Welcome to America Daily. I'm Vanessa Rios-Gomez. Today's special podcast is on meat. Is meat really bad for your health? You'll be surprised by our findings. And we talk with the author of The Porn Trap, Wendy Maltz. We've heard countless studies over the years concluding how meat is bad for our health. About as many that tell us meat is good for us. Especially in the last few years when the ketogenic diet craze took off. But a new study challenges years of research saying eating meat can cause cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and other health problems. Is a plant-based vegan diet really all it's cracked up to be? Our brother in podcast, Chris Chappell from America Uncovered, takes you through his search for some meaty answers.
Where's the beef?
A new study on meat is creating controversy because it challenges assumptions about whether meat is unhealthy. This is America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Everyone knows that meat is bad for you. For a long time, we've been told that meat, especially red meat and processed meat, can raise your risk of getting cancer, and heart disease, and diabetes, and of an early death. And most important, eating meat makes you a bad person who's destroying the planet. But hey, at least you're going to die early. According to one of the directors of the World Cancer Research Fund, the message people need to hear is that we should be eating no more than 3 portions of red meat a week and avoiding processed meat altogether. Limiting your intake of red meat is also the advice of the American Cancer Society and the American Heart Association. These studies have informed government dietary recommendations around the world. There's even been an effort to get processed and red meat out of school cafeterias globally, from New York to Helsinki. Which makes it a little surprising that at the beginning of October, this study by an international team of researchers concluded that actually the link between red meat and cancer, heart disease, and death is actually not well supported by research. Here's one of the co-heads of the study.
Based on the research, we cannot say with any certainty that eating red or processed meat causes cancer, diabetes, or heart disease.
Now, if that's a shocker, wait till you hear their recommendations.
For the majority of people, but not everyone, continuing their red and processed meat consumption is the right approach.
What? That's the exact opposite of what we've been told to do. Obviously, this latest study is causing controversy. Critics are saying the study has problems. A Harvard professor of epidemiology and nutrition who advocates a vegan diet pointed out many of the participants of the study were young and unlikely to succumb to illness in the short time period involved in the trials. Others have accused the group of researchers as being biased. The researchers have a partnership with a branch of Texas A&M University. That branch receives some funding from the beef industry. Nevertheless, most scientists are saying their methodology was thorough.
They picked through data from 54,000 people who had taken part in various randomized trials. They were looking for a connection between eating meat and health outcomes.
We did not find a statistically significant or an important association in the risk of heart disease, cancer, or diabetes for those that consumed less red and processed meat. Further, amongst cohort studies following millions of participants, we did find a small reduction in risk amongst those who consumed 3 fewer servings of red or processed meat per week. However, the certainty of evidence was low to very low. For vegetarians and those who don't eat a lot of meat, they often cite health concerns for these choices. However, the benefits of abstaining from meat are uncertain, and if they do exist, they're very small.
Now, to be clear, this new study is not saying meat is good for you. So put down the triple bacon cheeseburger. I said put it down, Steve. Anyway, the study is saying that the data on whether meat is good or bad for you doesn't support a conclusion either way. So we shouldn't tell people to eat more or less meat because there isn't enough evidence. This study is what's called a systematic review. They didn't do their own trials or experiments. These studies are a type of research where people comb through all of the publications on a single topic and bring them together to form the most robust perspective on a subject. Kind of like when you read all 61 Amazon reviews to bring together the most robust perspective on which pillowcase to buy. Basically, these researchers looked at the same data that for years has been the basis of various arguments about how meat is bad for our health. But instead of looking at a single study, they looked at 61 of them. They also reevaluated whether the reported results were actually supported by the data. And after putting all those studies together, they came to a completely different conclusion. In other words, the evidence didn't change, the interpretation did. What this boils down to is the fundamental difficulties of studying nutrition and health. To quote one epidemiologist, nutrition science is fiendishly complicated and we'll probably never know definitively whether red meat is good or bad for your health. Quote me. I will, thank you. Why is this the case? The highest standard for medical and health science is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, the kind used in drug trials. I won't get into all the details of that, but the main point is they can determine cause and effect. This drug causes this effect. But you can't have that for a nutrition study looking at what effect a meat diet has, because that would involve randomizing, then feeding meat or no meat to thousands of people for decades, which is A, unethical, and B, impractical in the extreme. So nutritionists have to rely on observational studies, not double-blind placebo-controlled studies. But observational studies can't prove cause and effect. They can only show correlation. And correlation is not causation. For example, and this is real, there's a 99% correlation between US per capita consumption of margarine and the divorce rate in Maine. But more Americans eating margarine does not actually cause people in Maine to get a divorce. Probably. Unless Fabio's involved, and then all bets are off.
I can't believe.
I can't believe it's not butter.
The point is, these observational studies also can't say for sure that eating meat causes certain health problems, even if it's correlated to them. Here's how an observational study for meat would work. You take a large group of people over a long period of time, ask them what they eat, and study the outcomes. And there may be a correlation between eating meat and these health problems we're talking about. But the problem is, we have no clue what else might be going on. Did the people who eat meat in these studies also smoke and drink? Was that hamburger patty served with a side of fries and a Coke? Did they not exercise? Did they meet Fabio, then eat a bunch of margarine and drive to Maine to get a divorce? There are lots of factors that can affect health, and these studies can't account for all of them. And beyond that, having people accurately report how much meat they consume is also really problematic. Can you name every meal you had in the past month? Can you even remember what you had for lunch yesterday? And do you have any idea what's actually in the McRib? And do you really care? Yes, I will eat a yoga mat if you smother it in McRib sauce. And yes, I know the McRib isn't made out of yoga mats. I'm saying I would still eat a yoga mat. Anyway, to find out how many McRibs people ate, scientists attempt to get answers through food diaries, recall surveys, and the Food Frequency Questionnaire, or FFQ. Some of the questions are pretty straightforward. How many cups of coffee do you have a day? Others are some real thinkers. How many cups of ribs have you consumed in the past 3 months? Yes, because cups are the way normal people talk about how many ribs they've eaten. So asking people what they ate can result in not very good data. And let's not forget the problem of correlation versus causation. To illustrate how problematic that FFQ is, the website 538 had their readers take an FFQ. Their shocking new study, based on 54 results, found that eating raw tomatoes is linked to Judaism, eating egg rolls is linked to dog ownership, and eating steak with the fat trimmed is linked to a lack of belief in a god. Because anyone that cuts the fat off their steak is clearly a godless psychopath. That's my own interpretation of the data. Anyway, observational studies can be misleading. Here's another, which is misleading for a different reason. The International Agency for Research on Cancer produced a study that says eating 50 grams of processed meat every day increased the risk of colon cancer by 18%. That sounds scary. Like if I eat 50 grams of pepperoni a day, I have an 18% higher chance of getting colon cancer. But that's not what it means. See, the lifetime risk of someone developing colon cancer is about 5%. This observational study found that among people who eat 50 grams of processed meat each day, the prevalence of colon cancer was just under 6%. 6 is roughly 18% more than 5, hence the 18%. Okay, so that sounds more like if you have 100 people who all stop eating their 50 grams of processed meat each day, then one of them who was going to get colon cancer won't get colon cancer, even though 5 of them still will. But that's weird, right? It would mean stopping eating processed meat has a life-changing impact for that one person and no impact for the other 99 people. So if I ended my morning routine of pepperoni for breakfast, there's a 99% chance it still wouldn't make any difference in terms of my getting colon cancer. That's not actually helpful when it comes to my own nutritional intake. It says absolutely nothing about what changing my diet would do to me as an individual. Now granted, you might find it useful if you're an administrator evaluating whether to include processed meat in 1 million school lunches. But you still shouldn't trust it completely because remember, that study only shows correlation, not causation. And even if it did show causation, which it doesn't, the data itself might be suspect, because as I mentioned, nutritional survey data is often collected in sloppy ways where the margin of error in data collection is so big that it leads to misleading results, like the people who eat egg rolls tend to have dogs. And this is where the debate about the latest meat study comes in. The authors felt that after examining several dozen studies, the quality of evidence implicating red and processed meat in adverse health outcomes remains unclear. In other words, they're not saying red meat and processed meat are healthy, they're saying that even after tons of studies, you really can't be sure. And you'd think we could just leave it at that, right? Wrong. Many of the scientists, doctors, and experts who have spent years demonizing meat and advocating a plant-based diet are trying to kill the new study like it was a 400-pound wild Kentucky hog.
A group of doctors from Harvard, Stanford, and elsewhere want it retracted on grounds of public health. And they've put together a statement saying that changing up guidelines on meat as a result of the review would be irresponsible.
Dr. David Jenkins, a longtime advocate of veganism, said the evidence against us giving up meat may be weak, but it's there. And the evidence for us eating more meat is not there. All I'm saying is, if someone says there's a weak chance that if you walk across the street, you'll get shot, I would rather stay on the opposite side of the street. Which is why I always advocate for just staying inside your home, cowering in fear. But even if you're not as susceptible to fear-mongering as I am, don't relax yet. The new study itself is dangerous. Scientists at Harvard are warning that its conclusions harm the credibility of nutrition science and erode public trust in scientific research. That's right. A new study that points out how previous studies are unreliable could cause people to lose trust in the people who misinformed us for years. So we should suppress the new study and get back to listening to those other people. One of the doctors involved in the new study calls the blowback hysterical and says more discourse is needed. And that's important because these studies are what governments use to create nutritional guidelines. Let me give you a historical example. Cholesterol. You've probably heard it's bad for you. We have Ansel Keys to thank for that. In 1955, he published the 7 countries study. He looked at 7 countries and concluded that saturated fat and cholesterol from animal products lead to heart disease. Now, there's a lot of controversy these days about that study, but in 1977, the US government issued its first set of dietary guidelines based partly on that data. And since then, beef consumption per capita in the US is down. And the US has largely been transitioning to a more plant-based diet. Grain, fat, and oil consumption is way up. And as Keys would recommend, it's mostly vegetable oil. Since then, heart disease has gone down slightly. Great! Good job, American government. We ate less saturated fat and cholesterol, and now we're healthier. Except in that same period of time, there's been an obesity epidemic. It's weird to say, oh, Heart health is better now. There's just way more obese people. But we're back to the whole problem of correlation versus causation. In 2015, the USDA issued new guidelines that decided not to recommend people limit their cholesterol because available evidence shows no appreciable relationship between consumption of dietary cholesterol and serum cholesterol. Cholesterol is not a nutrient of concern for overconsumption. Was misguided nutritional advice the cause of the obesity epidemic? Or was it nacho cheese-flavored bugles? The takeaway is, nutritional studies are complicated and sometimes unreliable. And then their findings get simplified in ways that can be not correct. So we probably shouldn't completely change our lifestyle just because of stupid headlines like, "Meat is killing us according to science." Thanks for listening to America Uncovered. You can also watch our video episodes at youtube.com/America Uncovered. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Tune in next time.
Just a generation ago, only a small minority of men would have been considered regular porn users. Today, porn reaches an unprecedented number of people from all walks of life, and it reaches them 356 days a year, 24/7. In the United States alone, 40 million people visit internet porn sites at least once a month. Some visit for only a few minutes at a time, while others stay for hours on a regular basis. A whopping 25% of all daily internet search requests and 35% of all downloads are for pornography. There are more than 400 million pages of pornography on the internet. You no longer have to go looking for porn. Porn is looking for you. As you might expect, most regular porn users are male, from 75 to 85%. You may be shocked to learn that youth under the age of 18 have become one of the largest consumer groups of porn, and it is cause for concern. So how do you know if using pornography is a healthy choice for you or not? Join author Wendy Maltz and Tony Rezac as they unpack this somewhat awkward but extremely relevant topic.
Hello, welcome to Basecamp for Men. I'm your host, Tony Rezac. This is the show that gives you insights and resources in how to live a more courageous life. We'll be looking at men, the current state of masculinity, and how to create a more inspiring narrative for all men. Welcome, and let's get started. Many of the sexual problems that porn causes come about because porn creates an overdependence on visual imagery for arousal. Yes, men can find pornography to be erotic and exciting. It's just that habitual porn use and a truly happy partner rarely coexist. I'll say that again. Habitual porn use and a truly happy partner rarely coexist. This is because a relationship with pornography undermines the critical values that are the foundation of a healthy, intimate relationship. Values such as honesty, intimacy, respect, trust, and love. Studies show that 70% of people keep their porn use secret. And even when they are upfront about their porn use, they often hold back sharing detailed information in order to prevent upsetting their partner. A relationship with porn signals to a woman that something else has her partner's sexual interest, not her. And the lying and deception porn users often rely on to cover up their porn habit make honesty, trust, and respect impossible. So, how do you know if you're using pornography as a healthy part of your sex life, or it has become a problem and needs to be addressed? Well, today we're going to talk to Wendy Maltz, who is an expert in the areas of healthy sexuality and the pitfalls of pornography. Wendy Maltz is an internationally recognized sex therapist, author, and speaker with more than 35 years of experience treating sex and intimacy concerns. She authored many highly acclaimed sexuality resources, including the Recovery Classic, The Sexual Healing Journey, a guide for survivors of sexual abuse, as well as The Porn Trap, the essential guide to overcoming problems caused by pornography, as well as Private Thoughts, exploring the power of women's sexual fantasies. Wendy's popular educational website, www.healthysex.com, provides free articles, podcast interviews, posters, videos, and more to help people overcome sexual problems and develop skills for love-based sexual intimacy. Here's my interview with Wendy Maltz. I guess to start off with, what are the pitfalls of pornography, and what do men learn about masculine and femininity based on, a regular use of pornography?
Well, first I want to say that you're not alone in having this experience of pornography becoming for you something that you were questioning and that you saw that might be problematic, and having gotten messages that it's no big deal. I was a trained sex therapist for 40 years. And in the early stages of the work I did with couples and individuals, porn rarely came up as an issue. It wasn't until the internet came, and what we were seeing was what's happened since you were young and I was young, is that this product morphed. It changed. It became something way more powerful than it had been. It became something very easy to access. You can get it now 24/7. 70% of all porn is now accessed through mobile devices. Even since writing the book, it's become even more prevalent and easy to get to. And the product itself morphed into something where the depictions of sex became a lot more extreme, because it's essentially produced as for men as a masturbatory aid. That's how they make their money. They get people hooked on the free stuff. And then it's actually pretty scary to see when you read the studies of how there are algorithms that are now pointing people based on the clicks you do when you're watching. Algorithms kick in just like shopping and the other things we have. And it's essentially taking the viewer to the paid sites, which tend to be even more violent, based on violence, aggression, a lot of racism, a lot of sexism, and also towards child pornography, the barely legals, and extreme sex, because people get habituated to what they're looking at. And so it's a commercial industry, so they need to get people seeing what's going to get them a little bit shocked, what's going to seem novel and exciting. So it's a different product. It's very powerful. It's hard to get away from now. Before it was hard to get. Yeah. But, there's lots of teasers for it in terms of even cologne ads and things like this that will pop up on ESPN, or, a lot of the male sports sites will show scantily clad females, and it just like clicks the brain into, I think I'll do some porn. Yeah. And, you're already
While
started.
I'm here. Yeah.
While I'm here. Oh, yeah, porn, So they're really geared toward making money, and it's almost like a spider trap that it pulls people in.
Back when I was a kid, there wasn't any internet. Makes me sound like I'm 200 years old, right? There wasn't any internet when I was growing up.
When we were young.
Yeah, the only access, if your father had Playboy or something like that, right? And those were there was nothing really graphic. These were just like topless women, right? If you wanted something else, you had to go buy it. And nobody was doing that, because you're like, I could run into my baseball coach or, my friend's mom at the store. Like, there was this kind of deterrent where you're like, I'm not doing that. There's no way.
Do you remember when it was in the back room of video stores? Like, there was a little cubby place.
I remember hearing about it. I grew up in a small town, so we didn't have anything like that. But I know in the big cities, they had like the peep shows and all that stuff. But that was, wow. And
now it's in your face. Yeah. And it's like the first, rather than like spice, that's something that could be considered spice for a relationship, or even kind of a way to learn something about sex and how to be sexual. It's now like right there, and it's right there for young people. We have a whole generation whose first exposure to what sex is comes from porn, and whose first sexual experiences are masturbating to porn. And boy, that can set in some pretty strong associations and expectations that actually end up being counterproductive later on.
If you've got a young person at home, which I do, would you, as a therapist, would you recommend setting parental controls, which kind of says, I don't trust you? Or would you just have a talk and say, hey, this stuff's out there and this is the pitfalls of it and this is how it's going to maybe alter your brain around this topic? Or, you just work to get him healthy influences in the area of sex education?
Well, I like the second option you were describing a lot better than the first, because the thing is, kids can get it. They can get it if they want it. They can get it at any time, day or night. They have friends. You can put it on a thumb drive. You can, it's just there. You can't really set controls. That doesn't mean it would be good to have it easy to access through home computers or the kind of setup you have for a young person on their mobile device. It's better to have as many barriers so that the young person isn't coming across it inadvertently a lot and has to go a few more steps to get it. But I think it's the conversation. It's really the relationship between the parent and the child, or the older brother and the younger brother, being able to say, hey, this stuff, it looks great, it delivers, but it also delivers a whole lot of other stuff that for some people can ruin their lives.
Yeah, I definitely have experience with men that have really, really struggled with it. Is there such thing as healthy porn use? What's the diagnostic? For some men, I know it's just, look, I have addictive patterns. I'm just staying away. That's what's the healthy choice. But for a man that's like, well, I go on once in a while. Is there such thing as healthy porn use, or it's really a slippery slope and the recommendation is like, have a healthy sex life, but really do it without the use of digital pornography, which is everywhere, like you were talking about?
Well, it's hard to generalize. Everybody is different. Like you said, some people have addictive tendencies just with anything. You give them a lot of cheesecake and they can't stop eating it. I think certainly people with compulsive and addictive tendencies, they run a higher risk of developing serious porn problems if they get into it a lot, and use it on a regular basis. Is there healthy porn use? I think erotica, there may be a place for erotica, but that could be a DVD on tantric sex or, on sexual massage. I think that some of the lines that people have described where it becomes unhealthy is when it becomes something they actually need and depend on in order to experience self-pleasuring and masturbation, or the go-to in their brain, the fantasies, in order to get aroused.
To hear more of this interview, find Tony Rezac's Basecamp for Men podcast series at americadaily.com, or search your podcast app for America Daily and Basecamp for Men and subscribe. Join us next time to hear how the Soviet Union exported communism. Once again, I'm Vanessa Rios Gomez. Thanks for listening.
This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.